Arc 6, Chapter 75. Louis Arneb, Wanna Become Happy. The scene changes. What are termed as the positives and negatives of life are great gambles determined by birth and environment. That had been the philosophy Louis Arneb acquired. Upon the extremity of eating and hunting down the lives of innumerable humans, as the Sin Archbishop of Gluttony. Louis Arneb was the youngest sister among the three siblings who were Sin Archbishops affixed with gluttony. By nature, contrary to the scale and unsound state of control of its activity, was the witch cult with surprisingly unascertained true state of affairs, though much regarding the Sin Archbishops especially was enveloped in mystery. Although the principal source for that was that the majority of people who happened upon them had lost their lives, the ones to have their names well known even amongst Sin Archbishops know. It is past tense, so the ones who had their names well known must have been the two of sloth and greed. Aside from those, even if it was identified that the Sin Archbishops of wrath and lust, and finally, gluttony existed, for several years it had been fogged with enigmas what kind of a bunch they were, much less the very existence of Louis Arneb, the youngest sister among the trio of siblings of gluttony, save for fellow Sin Archbishops being the only exception, was unknown. The concealed Sin Archbishop, that had been the position Louis Arneb stood at. "Well, it's not as if we wished for it, you know," so whispered Louis, stretching her legs within the white space she had been in since birth. Impotently, Louis could not exit this white space and did not have the ability to meet anyone. Unable to avail the authority of gluttony anywhere except in the location where it was highly restricted as well, it was what is called an unused treasured possession to her. However, thanks to her two elder brothers, only when it came to meals was she not incapacitated. That was because the memories and names her elder brothers ate, that is to say, the lives of others, she could unassociatedly snitch that food and be able to fulfill her hunger. Why do we have to be like this? Fulfilling her hunger through her elder brother's leftovers, whilst indulging in the lives of others. Louis, who was having her self-identity molded and taking form little by little, immediately discerned that she was in circumstances entirely different from others. Without a body that could be free, what she could operate was merely consciousness. Though she possessed the memories of having walked, she possessed no experience of having walked. That was the defective article known as herself. Ah, we are in such unhappy circumstances. That was how Louis recognized to herself that she was in a sorrowful environment, and she understood these circumstances shan't change, regardless how much she lamented. In order to console their younger sister lost adrift within such sorrow, her elder brothers seemingly vied with each other and ate, and provided their little sister the platters same as what they had eaten themselves. Those platters which her elder brothers served to her were brimming with respective individuality. Lay, who named himself Gourmet, loved lives with strong flavors for both better or worse. Roy, of bizarre eating, anyhow gave precedence to amount, becoming entranced for fulfilling hunger with off flavors. From Louis' perspective, if she had to say then, she had been able to enjoy the platters chosen by Lay on numerous occasions. But on numerous occasions, she had also made gains from the platters chosen by Roy, who ate and hunted in an unprincipled manner, chewing and digesting 11 lives, comparing flavors by rolling them atop her tongue and within her mind, what she came to understand. That was the difference in the absolute amount of joyfulness. Louis, who possessed the power to compare the lives of others through her own sense of values, graded various items such as the difference of wealth and poverty, or the presence or absence of affection, from the environment of growth to family and friends, the existence of lovers, through a formula based on their extent, awarding scores to the lives of others from one to the next, and continued rating. For being prosperous by birth, for being loved by parents and siblings, for living a life sailing smooth without any trials or tribulations, for having a great number of friends who could be reached out to in times of difficulty, for possessing overflowing talent such that it was possible to stand above all others. Either this or that or this or that, regardless of fortune and misfortune, countless reasons, such that some could be discarded. Though it was an idea terribly prideful and conceited, Louis possessed the authority to make it attainable. If it were to be expressed in alternate words, That was equivalent to the act of peeping onto the screen of a game other people were playing, complaining and pointing out they should have done this, and they should have done that, all whilst ridiculing them. Knocking disdain and mockery across the entire screen, she criticized the lives of others as per her own conveniences as a bystander. Showering jeers as well, striking frank impressions lacking all distinction between likes and dislikes as well, all to her own contentment. Those were Louis' deeds, rating as per her principles, egoistic abuse and slander. However, that which she enjoyed at first soon turned wearisome as well. That was natural. What Louis could do was to review the memories passed on to her. She could not interfere with anything further. She did not possess the ability to speak of the present and the future. Even if she tried to speak ill of or correct the gameplay of others, there was nobody who would lend an ear to what she would point out. That is why she lost her initial amusement. To incessantly look at the play of unskillful humans was close to torture rather than just being tedious. Even though, if allowed to, then we would do it so much better. Because each and every single one is incompetent. Despite possessing feet to walk their own life, despite having arms to cut through distress, despite owning a head to picture the future, all of the other people were brainless. Louis' elder brothers, Lay and Roy, were no exceptions to that either. Rather, they could be called the incarnation of ineptitude. If memories would be peeped into, it could be well understood what that life failed at, and at what point was it unable to recover. All of them accumulated failures terribly simple and trivial. Why would one stumble at such a spot? Louis was unable to comprehend it all. Incompetent, incompetent, incompetent. If you're going to live irresponsibly, then hand it over to us, that life. We will do it way why better. Everyone is too brainless. From one to the next, lives ought to be felt contempt for were itemized in the form of platters. Chewing and digesting numerous, multitudinous of them, Louis was overwhelmed with rage and became nauseous. Without realizing such emotions of Louis, redacted, her elder brothers, who successively resumed eating for fulfilling their own desires, she also felt irritated at, without even feeling anxious for their younger sister, who was making a nauseous expression, the folly of continuing to provide filled platters incessantly. What could she possibly detest? Could she not detest that? Ah, you sure eat while finding it delicious, Oni-chan. Ah, you sure eat while finding it fun, Nig-sama. Ah, we are, even now, feeling nauseous, you know. That was the reason why Louis Arneb named herself Satiation. The starvation not fulfilled no matter how much is eaten. For what was starved was not her body, but her redacted. The scene changes. Want to become happy. 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 The scene changes. Ahahaha. This is the feeling of walking outside, isn't it? Both Oni-chan and Nig-sama doing this the whole time. Unfair. Within the enforced confinement, her shackled self-consciousness followed the lone road to expansion. Just as eating facilitated healthy growth amongst humans, while being provided with platters unwished for as well, Louis underwent favorable growth vigorously. The same was also the case with Lay and Roy, her two elder brothers. Her elder brothers, too, had their own ego enlarge rampantly, having their redacted feel greater zeal for meals. The insensible food selection by such elder brothers of hers, Louis anyhow felt irritated by. That change had been a byproduct of Louis' such growth and irritation. This is the air of outside. This is the water of outside. This is the soil of outside. This is the blood of outside. Amazing. It's real. Lying sprawled on bare earth, whilst lovingly licking the soil, having his fill of the world with his entire body, was a young boy now. Though that very flesh body belonged to the personage who named himself as Lay Baten-Katos, the content within it was disparate. It was not Lay wielding the right of control over that flesh body and moving about freely. Believed to possess the fate of being unable to leave the white world congenitally, Louis Arneb, the Sin Archbishop of Tragedy, it was her form having broken through the white cage for the first time. It had been a coincidence. Certainly, she did not think the authority possessed such an ability, Or perhaps Louis' craving spirit had stimulated the authority to bloom instead. There was no definite answer. Neither was it momentous. What was momentous was that this had been realized, that she had walked outside. Ehehaha, ehehaha. Intervening between her restricted reality, Louis grandly guffawed for the fruit it bore. It had become possible for her to borrow her elder brother's bodies and independently manipulate that body, that authority. And, lay just what is the meaning of this? While putting on airs as something like gourmet and being fastidious. Are you sure you didn't get too hungry and go crazy? Ahahaha, that's wrong, that's completely wrong. That's wrong anyway, as that's wrong. That's certainly wrong, as that's certainly wrong, that is wrong because that's wrong. We are, witch cult sin archbishop representing gluttony Louis Arneb. Saying so, Louis gave greetings to the baffled Roy Alfred, using the body of Lay baiting Catos. For this had been the first time ever since she was born, did she get to even converse with her elder brothers after all. It's the cute little sister, the third sibling of Oni-chan and Ni-sama. Please be loving, please be doting, please be well-wishing, and please be caring, okay? The scene changes. Want to become happy. 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 The scene changes. By borrowing the bodies of her elder brothers, she acquired a method to meddle with the outside world. Her elder brother's supply of food did not halt, and as always, never did she suffer with hunger. However, such long-awaited opportunities, and jumping out into the outside world she much yearned for, Louis Arneb grew tired of it before long. She ended up growing tired of it. Outside is pretty boring, more than what we though ut. In the end, a borrowed body was a borrowed body. There lay no change in the fact that the real form of herself, who was unable to be free, was trapped inside the white world. Rather, by firmly making certain of her shadow, she strangled her throat by herself. In the end, something like life is not what you eat or how much you eat, who you eat with, and yet. Her elder brothers were living lives of their own, for that must be why they were not seeking it. Louis alone had been dispossessed of her own life, for that must be why she was eternally seeking it. Want to become happy. Within the white world, whilst untidily scattering around countless memories, she wished for that with all her redacted. That could have perhaps been the greatest or the sole desire of Louis Arneb. Want to become happy. A desire unfulfilled, unfading regardless of her borrowing the bodies of her elder brothers or kicking others as per her liking. Albeit tasting rich lives and getting drunk on momentary pleasures, it all perished immediately. Want to become happy. She grew tired of it. She had grown tired of it. She wished for a life which belonged to herself and her alone. She wished for a body, a soul, a destiny. Want to become happy. Louis was sorrowful. The origin of Louis' sorrow was that nowhere present a life which was her own. Want to become happy. However, at the same time, Louis knew herself. Even if her fickle-natured, easily resigning self attained a life that suddenly appeared before her, it would be inconceivable for her to be satisfied by that. After all, she had known. In this world lay countless lives. In them lay the absolute amount of joyfulness, and they were primarily determined upon the result of the incorrigible great gambles. In what way would things play out for a human belonging to a poor residence born into the harsh, holy kingdom of Gustico? In what way would things play out for a human weak by birth born into Valatia Empire, which valued warriors? In what way would things play out for a slow-footed nitwit born into Kararagi city-states, which expected perpetual progress? In what way would things play out for a mixed race, a silver-haired half-devil born into the kingdom of Lugnica, which was spoiled by ancient customs? By possessing the selves of others, Louis was aware that they would not have a decent time. However, to say joyfulness would be being affluent in those aspects would be an immense mistake as well. Being born into the household of a great priest in the holy kingdom of Gustico, being born into the household of a general in Valatia Empire, being born into the household of a distinguished merchant in Kararagi city-states, being born into the household of any kind of an influential noble in the kingdom of Lugnica. As one looked upward, it continued without cease. Louis did not want to be inferior. She wanted to be affluent. She did not want to be looked down upon. She had continued rating the lives of others. Within those, naturally the lives who had received the worst evaluation. But with all the lives who had received the highest evaluation, it was not as if all of the items to be graded within them were the greatest. Even those highest evaluated lives, she could not gain satisfaction by. Want to become happy. Lay and Roy, around that time, discovered a novel transfiguration of the authority eclipse. The ability the authority of gluttony was endowed with was the ability to plunder the memories, the names, from others, chewing and digesting them. Applying that in practical use, the authority of solar eclipse and lunar eclipse which reconstructed the plundered populace, drawing out techniques or knowledge from the memories of others, and using them as one's own belonging, lunar eclipse. To the utmost, it drew out skills, not the benefits of the likes of physical abilities, so the possibility of not utilizing that power perfectly was high. Conversely, solar eclipse used the captured name as foundation and reconstructed the person's existence in its entirety, completely reconstructing the techniques polished by that flesh body. It could manifest strength to its maximum. As an ability, it went without saying that solar eclipse was overwhelmingly excelling, but her two elder brothers preferred to exercise not solar eclipse, but lunar eclipse. No, perhaps it would be more accurate to say that they feared using solar eclipse and found it repugnant. According to Lay and Roy's cognizance, solar eclipse seemed to drag along the thinking in the flesh body which had transformed. That sensation felt as if their selves were being damaged. It was unendurable, was the two's reasoning. Hearing what her elder brothers had to say, Louis, from the bottom of her redacted, found it to be utterly ludicrous. Despite even possessing their own flesh bodies, despite standing on a position where even their person had been established, to not be able to preserve their selves possessing firm beliefs, how deficient and puny must that self-consciousness be? It was no jest to assume the airs of being more sorrowful than her, who possessed no flesh body of her own, did not have even her siblings be cognizant of her existence for greater than 10 years, and had, at last, grown tired of even the sourness and sweetness of life. The authority of solar eclipse was very much splendid. Rather, for Louis it was convenient. It would be no misstatement to say that precisely this was the power Louis Arneb longed for. Louis Arneb was craving for a life belonging to her alone, that too, a life which was the greatest. That was unlike her elder brother's self-pleasure, who gained contentment by eating the lives of others and capturing memories. A right further refined and ubiquitous Louis wanted to live. Birth could not be chosen. That was the entire source of what brought forth sorrowful humans. However, Louis was different. Louis had acquired the power, the opportunity to choose her birth, her life. She could heist the memories of others, reconstruct them by way of solar eclipse, and make it to be her own belonging. She had the ability to choose life. Everything she could choose again. She shall be fastidious, seeking the greatest memories and name which she was yet to see. Though there had been some aligned favorably amongst what all Lay and Roy had eaten, they had not been perfect. There had been a dearth of novelty and ingenuity. Happy homes, tender parents, wealthy livelihoods and rich environments, magnificent friends and seemingly destined companions, All of it seemed naught but happiness which had seemingly been seen somewhere else. She was searching for not that, but the greatest life. Having the ability to choose as per one's liking did not coincide with the fact that one would not get tired of what one was choosing. Getting tired of the countless platters lined up before her eyes, what could she possibly find enjoyable? Louis Arneb was searching for the greatest life. She had been searching. That is why the scene changes. That is why when she happened upon Natsuki Subaru, Louis' chest pulsated intensely. Oh ho, Oni-san is, Natsuki Subaru, was it? To be precise, it did not throb the instant she had met him. Natsuki Subaru's outward appearance was not to Louis' taste to make it throb the instant of meeting him. From start, though it seemed a face not to her taste, in accordance with the sense of values cultivated within Louis, the beauty which a vast majority of humans pictured would precisely be the face Louis would seek. In that sense, there did not exist even a single atom which would throb for Natsuki Subaru's outward appearance. Moreover, from Louis' perspective, Natsuki Subaru was certainly a personage she had already known. But he was not someone she had been attentive of simply because he was in the memories of others. Though it was something not requiring much thought, the memories present within Louis went up to enormous numbers. It was not simple to draw out the intended memories from within that, all the more when the opponent was one she held no interest in. The reason why Louis yet recollected the opponent's name at a single glance was because, not Louis, but one of her elder brother's lay-baiting Katos had been considerably attached to that name. If not mistaken, then there had been something mightily attached to Natsuki Subaru amongst the platters Lay had eaten. This place you see, is the cradle of Odd Lagna, the Hall of Memories, the place where the souls of dead people are filtered. As it's rare for a person to come here maintaining oneself, you shall be welcomed, Oni-san. We have too much boredom at hand, you see. Smiling sinisterly, Louis gave a warm reception to the visit of the rare guest. Truth be told, there lay no dishonesty in those feelings of welcome. Louis longed for others, quite a bit. The birthplace of Louis Arneb, the white world she could not leave, the Hall of Memories. The reason why Louis was aware that this place had been designated that title, that the gigantic existence of unknown disposition was a workshop of such an enormous scale, was the result of her generally mobilizing the knowledge of the memories which Lay or Roy had eaten and hunted down. Within the ones fallen prey to the authority of gluttony, there had been many wise men who, in reality, had done great studies which would remain for posterity, and had made historical findings. Without seeing the light of day, they had settled into the soul of the bellies of the 3 gluttony siblings, but they were profoundly serving Louis. In all honesty, Louis was not at all interested in the reason why she was born here, or why she was confined here. Neither would there be any means to dispel those doubts, nor did she find it to be meaningful. She had assented it as that's just how things were. Even if she was suddenly taken into the outside world at this point, it would have merely been troublesome in its own way. The day she shall leave this place must be the day she has discovered the greatest life. Oh, sorry, name-giving was still left, isn't it? But do forgive. After all, introducing like this while being sober doesn't happen often in this place, you see. Well then, guess it's introduction one more me. We are Witch Cult Sin Archbishop, representing Gluttony, Louis Arneb. Don't know if it'll be for a long time or short, but please be caring, okay, Oni-san. The opponent was exceedingly surprised and distressed with regards to Louis, who named herself in that manner. Obviously enough, standardly, humans who step a foot here do not possess the aim of coming here. Though occasionally there are some who thus slip in, Louis considered that as something like lost souls rephrasing, the consequence of near-death experiences. A situation where the soul was easily separated from the flesh body, or a situation where it had come unstuck, perhaps. From their perspectives, such situations were close to the feeling of being summoned out of the blue by Odd Lagna. If that were to be considered, possibly, Louis' role was something like a guide who quelled the turmoil of people who had experienced near death, and elucidated what this place was. If that were to be considered as being atop Odd Lagna's invisible palm, that was, again, infuriating. Of course, being looked down upon, but Louis also despised being directed. That was the same as Odd Lagna, an existence for whom that perpetually was the usual state of things. Louis did not want her life, which yet remained to commence, to be distorted by the interference of anyone but Louis. Of course we do know. Lei and Roy, Onii-chan and Nick-sama, right? Don't get so excited, Onii-san, as the two are just devoted to their little sister, you know. The two of them devouring here and there too, part of it is for our sake. They lack brains and don't have a grasp on our preferences at all either, but they are being considerate. Probably, isn't it? But it can't be helped, isn't it? After all three of us have never even been together. By borrowing Onii-chan or Nie-sama's body, you see, we have gone outside a wee bit on times, you know. But when we do that, the one lending his body goes to sleep and can't be met, is what that means. That's why all three of us have never been together. Owa spilled that out. Enumerating whilst speaking rapidly in somewhat agitation, Louis carefully observed the opponent's reaction. Slight panic, just a smidgen of daze. Somewhat preponderant rage, and a fairly strong sense of purpose. What was perplexed at first had now regained presence of mind, possessing the ambience of trying to proceed ahead logically. Not bad, with that thought in her innermost redacted, Louis licked her lips. Whether it should be labeled as being accustomed to diving into scenes of carnage, he was suitably fast in adapting to situations. If observed and compared with the impression she had received at first, that was quite a mismatching attribute. That which varied greatly from the original attribute, a posteriori, too, was an attribute compelled into polishing. What lay at its origin, Louis incited her appetite with interest, and alongside, there it is, there it is. This is it, right, Onii-san. Whilst conversing, what Louis towed out were certain memories. The greatest reason why Lei, through a single platter which Lei had indulged in, was attached to the juvenile before her eyes. Reeling in and collecting the memories mightily, potently calling out to that existence, Louis synchronized with them. Owa! At that precise moment, her breathing was obturated by feelings of love overflowing out in the interior of her chest. Welling up unaware of any bounds, the feelings of love for the juvenile within her sight. He was so beloved, so in love with, it was unbearable. Louis' small chest hottened, and her entire body throbbed with a sweet premonition. With her eyes moist, her breath sweet and warm, her lips smiled. And, please don't make such an anxious face. Subaru-kun. Upon that instant, there existed mighty, potent rejection. Honing his eyes whilst maintaining his rage, Natsuki Subaru charged ahead and pounced. Though she possessed the impulse to accept his outbursting self by spreading both her arms wide, she somehow immobilized that and sharply crawled into his chest in accordance with memories. Catching a hold of the juvenile's arms with smooth movement, pulling him towards herself, she gave him a twisting throw. With a flesh body which was not a real object, hallucinating the sound of his bones creaking, the juvenile, giving rise to a roar of anguish, was held down onto the white floor by her. Please stop. If you throw yourself so bravely, it will be embarrassing. Something like that. Utilizing the memories which thought lovingly of the juvenile, she held the juvenile down through sheer force. With her sadistic redacted fulfilled, she ended up relaxing the edges of her mouth. As if giving further satisfaction to that desire to afflict belonging to Louis, redacted, frantically continuing to scream, was Natsuki Subaru's voice as he twisted his body. His form, earnestly calling for rage for the sake of someone else upon that, incidentally, Louis tilted her head. Onii-san, why do you remember the memories we had stolen? It had been an unnatural response. Perceiving that whilst holding him down, Louis greatly twisted her neck. The memories eaten by gluttony did not remain extant within the person concerned. The names eaten by gluttony did not remain extant within other people. That is because the authority tore them off from the soul, which defined existence in the world. The proper cleansing of the soul by Ad Lagna, which was practiced in the Hall of Memories, arbitrarily acting as its agent, and stealthily deceiving, plundering, and harvesting was what the authority of gluttony was. Therefore, the memories and names snaveled by gluttony did not remain extant within anyone. Restrictively, though there had been ones who had only memories, only names stolen away, respective negative effects got applied. If the memories were stolen, then said person, if the name was stolen, then other people, could no longer remember the person concerned. That could not be altered as long as the disposition of the soul remained within the protection of Odd Lagna. Yet Natsuki Subaru did remember. The ingredient, the soul which had been rendered naked, having both sides of memories and name gotten stolen, despite not being supposed to be able to remember it. Why? We may have developed a bit of interest in Onii-san now, though it seems Onii-chan will resent us. Licking her lips, Louis dyed her cheeks with welling passion. It was the opponent Lei had been attached to. To have that food snitched detachedly from the side would surely make even Lei take befitting offense. Though Lei was actually quite soft and sweet to his little sister, the major premise of him listening to her selfishness was to the utmost until they did not cross each other's appetite. Appetite was, gluttony was, the meaning of living for Louis, for Lei, and for Roy as well. To have that be invaded arbitrarily could not let their redacted remain calm. If a dear platter that has been looked forward to is usurped, even if by a sibling, even killing them would be something that can't be helped, isn't it? Ah, but how irresistible Onii-san. Whilst twisting his arms behind his back, she drew her lips closer to the nape of the juvenile pushed onto the floor. It was something alike the form of the spirit with no true substance. She could not sense the taste of sweat from him, who was in the state of mere soul. Though by nature, even pain was something similar to hallucination, she did not intend to expressly inform him. Merely, the feelings of love she wanted to be in contact with erupted. It seemed the owner of these memories had been attached to this juvenile greater than what was appropriate. She could feel that strongly. Well, right now that goes for us. Should it even be a hearsay memory? Now that it had been stored like this, it belonged to her. She could slightly understand Lei or Roy's feeling of fear for Eclipse. She held no fear, but she did understand that the two's premonition was correct. Perhaps if she continued at this pace, we will certainly end up loving Onii-san, isn't it? The H, nauseating you say, that is so ha-rsh. Because despite everything we are still a girl, even though we mustered up courage and confessed, how cruel. Ah, you're acting violently again. That won't do, Onii-san. It won't hurt, so please calm down, okay? There's no way we would hurt Onii-san, you know. After all, he is so beloved. That's why calm you're redacted. No matter her tenderly addressing him in an effort to calm him down, she faced opposition through frantic meager movement. With the name of the memories called countless times, Louis had her entire body tremble with a sensation terribly ecstatic. This ecstasy could only be tasted from a personage remembering one who had their name stolen. Namely, a flavor which Louis had never tasted. An unknown, sweet, sweet berry. Natsuki Subaru, what shall your flavor be? Let's eat. Seeking the answer to that glacé inquisitiveness of her redacted, Louis tenderly licked the juvenile's nape with her scarlet tongue. Calling his name, whilst tasting a lanuginous texture on the tip of her tongue, amiably, suavely, she licked. In the significance of being fulfilled, what was termed as appetite lay similar to sexual desire. Within such strengthening of affection for the person before her eyes, for even this unremitting appetite to be fulfilled, this must now be something alike copulation sought after sordidly. People who mutually valued each other blend within the existence known as Louis. The sufficiency of that flavor, or how a saccharine a thing would it be? Thank you for the treat. Savoring adequately, as per her contentment, Louis conveyed her gratitude for the food through words. That was the procedure of gluttony's meal, invoking the name of the opponent, whose memories are desired to be stolen, peeling off one section of the soul from the opponent's flesh body, and eating that. What are termed as memories are things similar to sediments accumulated upon the soul. It was also possible to adorn that with alluring words, such as feasts dished upon white platters. However, should everything be exposed to its origin, what shall be stretching before would be the meaninglessness of adorning it beautifully. That was the cognizance of Louis, who was affixed with the authority of gluttony, and the ability to indulge in those souls, Louis privilege. With this, the entirety of what was associated with the soul of the juvenile before her eyes shall get particularized. What would then remain would be for her to mix it with the memories of the young girl already within Louis. then have her fill of what nature of chemical reaction it would cause. You, just now, what did you do to me? With a voice not supposed to be audible echoing, for the first time, Louis faced Natsuki Subaru himself. Until then, it had not seemed like they had been conversing. They had not faced each other as if facing each other. It had been naught but such a vague, drowning dream. That was, for Louis too, an occasion of never-before-seen circumstances, abruptly getting tinged with colors. What had been said just now? "Oni-san, it can't be you remember us." A gaze charged with mighty, potent animosity was the answer to Louis' doubt. Ah, that had been the moment Louis' slim, petite chest throbbed at a definite high rate of pulsation. The scene changes. Why, in spite of getting memories eaten, could he remain composed? Why, even now, was he glaring at Louis with such a look in his eyes? Why, despite within such bewilderment, was Louis having her chest throb so intensely? Why? Rather, that could have perhaps been the impetus deserving to be called premonition. Why does Oni-san remember us? Whilst glaring at the back of Natsuki Subaru's head, under her eyes, whom she had held down, what Louis suspected at first was the possibility of having failed at the meal. In the authority of Louis and the others, of gluttony there were a certain set of protocols absolutely necessary. The prime amongst them was to know the name of the opponent who was to be eaten. This was an indispensable element necessary for meddling with the soul of the opponent. Therefore, in the case of seizing an alias, the authority was rendered powerless. And, till now, there had been a number of cases of having failed at the meal. In those cases, the one to face the painful experience had always been either one of Lei or Roy, so not even once had Louis herself faced the painful experience, but Oni-chan and Nick-sama felt unpleasant, like it was painful, but Louis stiffened up her body, assuming there would be similar recoil upon her. However, though she waited for a long time, there were no signs of that supposed recoil rushing upon Louis. To begin with, new memories were certainly being poured within Louis. Watchtower of the Sage, dear comrades, and there were trials. Murmuring indicating approval, as if carefully reading a single book within her mind, Louis became entranced with excavating through the new memories. Appending to the fact that there occurred no recoil, she was being successful in the extortion of memories. Referring to those memories, she had comprehended what Natsuki Subaru and his comrades were doing, and even the sequence of events due to which he strayed into this hall of memories. What remained was for Natsuki Subaru's specialness to be, Upon that instant, the voluminousness of the impact which was firmly placed upon Louis, what words shall be apt enough to describe it? Astounded due to the overwhelming substance, with the strength in her arms fading, she widened her eyes. Prodding that interval, the held-down Natsuki Subaru made his escape from Louis' arms. Taking distance at the same pace, he took a fighting pose nothing too impressive. Though it was opposition rather comical and creasing up, Louis was not made to laugh at it. There existed no scope for her to be laughing over that. The impact of having seen something improbable was stabbing through Louis' petite physique. That was, why are there memories of the time of dying? No, that's not all. That's not all, Oni-san. It's of course strange to have the memories of the time of dying. Plenty odd, but it's strange. After all, in the memories we ate, there's nothing like the memories of killing Oni-san, yet Oni-san has the memories of getting killed. That was something abnormal. There was no origin. What was occurring was a mysterious paradox. The influence of Natsuki Subaru's memories, the repertoire of words originally she was not supposed to be aware of increase. It was a paradox. Under the emergency due to the paradox, Schrödinger's Maxwell's Einstein was Nikola Tesla. What is this? What's the meaning of this? Memories are different from delusion, The sediment stuck onto the soul can't be distorted or bent as how one pleases. That's why. This is the world Oni-san witnessed, Sue. This is the history Oni-san tasted. This is the story of Oni-san, only Oni-san knows, Sue. Putting her fingers into her long, golden-colored hair, Louis detonated her flaring impulse. Not even for a single second could she remain without hurling it instead of simply stockpiling this impulse. The very instant she did so, Louis Arneb erupted. Erupting and scattering across in all directions, her mind was fractionated into tiny fragments. New, new sense of values, Sue. It had been her meeting with that. Her meeting with an article which surpassed all imagination, which Louis had not known, had not seen, had not thought of. Her entire body transfixed by lightning, she was unable to think of anything else but that. What else could this be possibly called, should it not be called destiny? What name should possibly be affixed to these emotions? Oni-san, could it be you're the same as us? Aren't you a Sin Archbishop? Though we have never met directly, Beetlejuice said so, that the factors were supposed to have reached, that since the positions of sins were filled, eventually everyone would gather. That vacant seat is the seat belonging to Oni-san. Belonging to me, is it not? Ahahahahaha. Don't get angry please, Oni-san. Don't make us perplexed, any more than this, Oni-san. At this point, our mind is at its absolute limit. This small chest is about to burst open, it really hurts. Amazing, amazing, amazing. Tapping continuously, striking the temple of her own forehead with her fingers, Louis chewed the memories down to its very bones. Difficult to believe in, unable to be believed in. The margin of having it believed in existed only in a fortuitous meeting with none but gluttony. Since Louis could jointly own the same memories, she could believe in Natsuki Subaru's progression. No, she could not believe in it, but savvy it as fact. For this was the journey Louis Arneb had traversed as well. Ah, what pride! Unfair! Unfair, unfair. Unfair, 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 unfair. Wonderful Tsu, Oni-san, you really die again and again, again and again and again, isn't it? Wah-h, amazing. You're really dying. You're dying so miserably, Oni-san. Again and again, you're dying without any method of succeeding, Oni-san. Even something like this is possible, right, Oni-san? A round of applause, a standing ovation, congratulations for taking birth. Gratitude for the miracle of meeting you, the train to future which shall advance with me. Welling forth inspiration, receiving stimulus and innovation. Oni-san, so you came from a place not here, not anywhere, ha. Ah, we can't even think, Enemo. Ray. Spouting sentiments without confining her momentum. Louis, who was unreservedly immersed by it, making no effort for resistance, suddenly recognized that potentiality. No, she inclined her ears towards her inner voice. To know a scenery unknown, to have taken birth in a world untold, all were finest quality full courses which would fulfill the hunger called the inquisitiveness of Louis. Redacted. However, the speciality of Natsuki Subaru, which was deserving of utmost attention, was memories of death, not supposed to exist. Absolutely unattainable, there existed the memories of death and beyond. This was principally dissimilar to something like near-death experiences, which were like cheap test tour. A phenomenon established due to the soul shattering, life slashed into 1,000 fragments, the lifeline terminating in its true essence. The other side of the river of 3 crossings, the border of the living world and netherworld, which was impossible to rebound from. Neither swimming through it nor striding across it, the memories of redoing the life supposed to have been robbed away. Return by death. That was how Louis read the greatest showpiece of the memories blossoming within herself. Accumulating the experiences of sundry deaths as memories, that which could not be carved into memories even once, he handed over to his next self as something certain. And that Natsuki Subaru had surmounted all kinds of hardships. Amazing, amazing, Oni-san, truly amazing. We've been moved deeply. We admire it from the bottom of our redacted. You really can do something like that. Overcoming death with complete freedom. No need to be modest. We are serious, you know. We really do find Oni-san to be enviable. After all, something like the memories of death, nobody possesses it no matter what, Sue. Also, why is it so? Why are you all composed despite getting memories stolen by us? What specialness is it, souls save? Backup, invariance, makes no sense. Within the struggling, writhing Natsuki Subaru existed numerous, multitudinous memories of the time of dying. That was stimulation Louis, by no means, managed to acquire. Furthermore, to continue to die interminably, the power with the ability to stockpile death was the target of her jealousy. Want it. She desired the power of return by death, not for it being capable of repeating death. Naturally, that fresh stimulation was also a factor eternally captivating Louis, but what was further momentous was the ability to redo. Louis Arneb was searching for the greatest life, and the conclusion derived by Louis, having indulged in diverse lives, was that what was termed as the greatest life was neither being affluent, nor being loved by many, nor being blessed with a high status. What was termed as the greatest life referred to the life which went as one wished. Anything and everything would occur as one believed, as one expected, as one wished. Without any flaws, without any incompletion, without any irrationality, the perfect world view. She had always searched a method for its realization. The answer to that was an endlessly unbearing darkness within Louis, but finally she understood. Its return by death. Should she procure that, she would be able to recover from conflicts, from failures. Should she know what shall happen in future, she would be able to cope with it. If only she can know what failure shall occur, what irrationality shall await, what incompletion shall she come across. We can live the greatest life. What should be done? What should be done in order to steal it? If Oni-Isan's return by death is an authority, then it can't be stolen by just eating. It's different from things that come attached with memories and names. Which factors are the antithesis of Odd Lagna, after all? It won't come detached easily. That's why. That is why was an authority to be stolen. There was no choice but to steal the witch factor itself. However, even Louis was unaware of a method to steal as far as witch factors. Until now, never had she wished for an authority belonging to other Sin archbishops. That kind of a bunch was disgusting to even come in contact with. However, Oni-Isan, the authority of the killed Beetlejuice, you're using it. The unseen hand present within the memories had weakened in both numbers and range from the original, but indubitably was the power utilized by that lunatic. In other words, that was none but proof that several witch factors were being stocked in the interior of Natsuki Subaru. Stocking witch factors, if that was possible then. We will absolutely, no matter what, get our hands on return by death. Oni-Isan's authority is our hope. If that can be obtained, we will. We will be able to live our own life too. Want to become happy, 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 want to become happy. The method for that is right there. The method for that. Sue. Hick, how arbitrary. Something like return by death is nothing so good. A person possessing it can't understand the feelings of a person who doesn't possess it, Sue. Something like allotted persuasion, which had seemingly been heard somewhere else, was nothing but tedious. One who had continued using that power as per his contentment, disliking using that power, seemed foolish. That is why she shall definitely obtain it. Absolutely, definitely, with certainty. What shall be done? What shall be done in order to steal the authority? Wrong. That's wrong, it's wrong anyway, as it's wrong. Certainly it is wrong, as it's too wrong. We're saying it's wrong because it is wrong, Sue. Gluttonous drinking, Sue. Gluttony, Sue. Clapping her hands mightily, potently, Louis widened her eyes. Unraveling her sharp fangs, she applauded, suggesting how clear-headed herself was. Before one could notice, the means and objective switched positions. However, that wasn't the case. That was not the case. Louis' objective was not to plunder because she wanted to return by death, because she could amusingly live the greatest life by obtaining return by death. It was no good to have the bad habit of considering things hazardously remain clinging, because of having played something like Sin Archbishop representing gluttony for a long period of time. Problematic, imprisoning in fixated notions. That was a cause of defeat. It was simple. If it was not to plunder but to obtain, it'll be fine if we just become. It'll be fine if we just become Oni-Isan. If we become Oni-Isan and have him be consumed by the authority of gluttony, we can integrate witch factors, since if it's Oni-san, then they can be stalked. Saying so, Louis plucked her cheeks with both her hands, continuously, forcefully, tempted into violence. Not an endearing gesture, but excruciating, she did so wielding the intention of injuring. For what purpose? To tear apart her flesh and blood, and dividing herself, that was the purpose. You know the three great witch beasts. It's said that those are monsters created by the owner of the witch factor long before us. We, too, can do something similar. We didn't do that because there wasn't really any meaning in doing so. But, you see, if we think of doing it, then we can do anything. If we think of doing it, then we can do anything. That was what is called the monster of potentiality. That was what is called the potentiality of a pure existence prior to taking birth. That was one affixed with the destiny of living the greatest life, hereafter in the future. That was the destiny of the utmost joyful being named Louis Arneb. That is the existence known as us. The speech of the slowly spinning Louis was overlapped and enunciated. The phenomenon of hearing the same voice doubled was not some kind of auditory hallucination or mishearing. That was in accordance with the occurrence happening, for there appeared two of the same people, with the same voice, with the same tone. Got surprised by Oni-san's memories, but Arneb is a star of the constellation of the hare, huh? It was also astonishing that Oni-san and the others were the ones to destroy the sizable hare too. But if that's the case, then it doesn't become too much of a surprise. How come we multiplied, or is it Oni-san's great delight that cute Louis-chan multiplied? No, huh? No, so Oni-san is the type who doesn't sexually desire little girls. Is that so? Observing the opponent who was frozen in place, with his eyes widened in astonishment, Louis linked her shoulders with the existence standing immediately beside her, namely, the same Louis. Within this place, called the Hall of Memories, which was separated from reality, Louis was merely an existence of a witch factor possessing no flesh body and a soul joint together. Other than that, it rather seemed that the respective names of the three siblings corresponded with the three great witch beasts, though that, well, did not matter. Anyhow, separating the witch factor into two, Louis Arneb multiplied into two. This was a stunt perhaps Lei and Roy, who feared losing their selves upon the utilization of solar eclipse, those two were not capable of. To know it was possible to duplicate oneself, also tied together with forfeiting the true essence of one's real self. However, that did not apply to Louis, whose self had been established as vague from start. It was possible to have one Louis, two Louis, and so on. With this, Louis Arneb obtaining Natsuki Subaru's authority was. What? The juvenile, the receptacle of the witch factor, declared some words. Upon glancing at the juvenile, aside from the glamour called return by death, simply feelings of love welled up. Finding that annoying, Louis abandoned the memories emerging to the surface. Upon peeling them off of her own soul, she discarded and abandoned them with the notion of them being useless. No, that was not simply a notion. Truth be told, they were indeed useless now. All of the memories had been mere fillers until the greatest life was discovered, naught but side dishes. However, Louis Arneb had finally reached her full course. If we think of doing it, then we can do anything. That is why she shall tread onto this path, eating into Natsuki Subaru from the interior. Chewing the eaten into Natsuki Subaru from the exterior, sparing not a single bit, Louis Arneb shall obtain Natsuki Subaru. You'll redacted. Until the very end of the end, the receptacle continued saying something. However, what had it been saying? Something like that no longer held any relevance. Licking the sediment stuck onto the soul with her tongue, Louis inherited the memories. And within the receptacle which had forgotten anything and everything, Louis personally had herself appended to the witch factor. As for the rest, it's fine to simply wait for completion. Unremittingly waiting in the Hall of Memories was something she had grown all too accustomed to. Problem lied in the usage of the memories. There was a scheme for stealing memories once again from an opponent who had already been eaten once. The gourmet authority did not deem the menu of the same name, the same taste as a separate article in its judgment. That is why there present was a need to alter the flavor from the soul. into an article separate to such an extent that it was not possible to recall that it had once been atop the tongue of Louis, of gluttony. Anticipating it proves to be the taste of the finest quality, that which Louis Arneb had fervidly awaited, hoping it achieves completion into the greatest, utmost, supreme dish. Looking forward to that moment, whilst licking her lips and longing, the scene changes. Stranger, so, did you get to see what you wanted to see? Louis Arneb. Louis. Huh? Upon the sudden accost, Louis, who had gained awakening of her consciousness, rounded her eyes. Blinking a few times, she made certain of her location. White environs, white ground and white skies, standing within the world blanketed white, Louis had been making a stupefied expression. Louis. Having her hand touch her face, making contact, she made certain of the sensation. Since there was no mirror in this place, she could not take a look, but this sensation was irrefutably her own face. With there not being even any moderate amusements in this place, speaking of things touchable, only her own face, own body counted as one. That is why she had touched her face to an extent one would grow sick of touching it. That is why, upon touching her face she had grown sick of touching, she could immediately know in what state her face, her body was. Just as before. Yes, just as before. This was Louis' own body. Stranger. Did you get to see what you wanted to see, huh? Slowly, stupefied, making certain of herself was Louis. With that behavior reaching a point where it could pause, abruptly, the accost now overlapped once again. Lifting her face, Louis looked at the personage who had been standing before her, in front of her eyes all along. Rather short black hair and stabbing sanpaku eyes, with legs the same length as his body, wearing a shabby appearance, was the juvenile. His name, Natsuki Subaru. The existence Louis herself had become one with as a witch factor, and Louis. And the being of unimaginable insanity, wielding the authority which had the ability to return by death. Louis. No, nu uwu u uo o uo uotsu. Louis opened her mouth and roared. As long as the strength remained, as long as the possibility remained, with complete devotion she roared. Should she have not done that, she would get crushed by the pressure, by the terror, by the menace, by the despair. She would get snared in the insanity of a lunatic, who repeated and resumed continuing death time after time. Louis. Don't want to die. We don't want to die. Hate it, hate it, hate it, hate it, hate it. Hate it, hate it, hate it, hate it, hate it, hate it. Hate it, hate Ititsu. Swinging her head, collapsing onto the bare ground, Louis frantically appealed while drawing back. Assimilating with that existence, Louis had personally experienced death. She had tasted it. By being taken in by the soul who practiced return by death by her own volition, she had experienced return by death firsthand, which turned back even time. The memories of death that had been incomplete as merely Natsuki Subaru's memories. After all, memories were naught but memories. The sensational impact of never returning again upon letting go even once of that instant, of that juncture, of that moment, could never be obtained. That had been why she thirsted for that. She had thirsted for what flavor death had, even if death had been something less vivid than what Louis had expected. Using the authority that goes by the name of return by death, she could gain sufficient change with the right to walk a life in which redoing was a possibility. That is what she believed, until she herself tasted death, that is, Louis. Something like that can never be withstood. That anguish, sense of loss, no way can it be withstood. Impossible, impossible, impossible. Absolutely impossible. Hate it. Not even once had she possessed a way to die comfortably. Not even once had she felt death to be luscious. Not even once had she wished to die on her own volition. Natsuki Subaru had tasted that greater than 20 times, and had replayed that. Louis, someone who can withstand that, is not human. Monster, a monster artsu. She could not. No way she could. Louis had indulged in a great number of lives, affronted all kinds of souls, and had searched a life of her own. She believed she had possessed the right, the privilege, to do so. That is why she stretched her hands even into the soul of Natsuki Subaru. The consequence, she got her naive redacted shattered. Because, Louis, the human heart cannot withstand something like itself. And jitsu. Want to become happy, 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 wanted to become happy, wanted to become happy. That was the wish Louis Arneb had envisaged all along, for the whole time. Trampling upon all aspects of everything, she possessed the right to exercise her power for the purpose of acquiring the greatest life. Louis had remained, believing so without any pangs of conscience whatsoever until today. That premise crumbled. Wanted to become happy. However, right now, the wish right now was different. Louis, don't want to die. Don't want to die, don't want to die, don't want to die, don't want to die. Don't want to die, 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 don't want to die. Don't want to die, don't want to die, don't want to die, don't want to die, don't want to die. Don't want to die, 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 don't want to die. Die, don't want to 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 die. Subaru, that is why when you were trying to eat me, I told you. Her arms hugging her head, cowering, shaking her head in fear, desperately trying to protect herself was Louis. In close proximity to that Louis, immediately above Louis, who did not raise her face, onward came a voice descending. She did not want to listen to even that. Listening was terrifying. However, something which may befall upon her due to not listening was terrifying. Dying was frightening. That is why she had no choice but to listen. And whilst looking down upon Louis curling herself in fear, the voice continued. Its preface, saying you had been warned, Subaru. That you'll definitely regret it.